Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today in this panel. We are excited to be discussing today one of the um, perhaps more exciting outcomes to be expected from COP30, the um, the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, or TFFF for short. My name is Sebastián Rodriguez. I am Special Projects Editor with Climate Home. And yes, we'll be doing a lot more coverage of the TFFF during COP. We'll have a team on the ground at COP in Belém. And this is the first in our series of events on COP30. We will be hosting another panel on climate adaptation next week. And hopefully you can join that as well. And yes, so make sure to follow us and subscribe for all the latest in climate change diplomacy. We are expecting our other speakers to join in a second. But first, I'll perhaps start with a few words on the TFFF, a brief introduction on what it is and why it's so interesting for all of us joining the panel today. So perhaps before introducing the speakers, as others are still to join the call, the TFFF, as it is being proposed, is a blended finance instrument. It is a fund launched and led by Brazil, and it is set to formally be launched at COP30. Although it has been in the works for most of the past year. It aims to raise approximately 25 billion in public funds and $100 billion from private investors, with returns from market investments being used to pay forest countries for keeping their forests standing. The mechanism it differs quite significantly from other financial mechanisms in international climate finance, in that it uses financial markets to raise those funds. So it makes investments in financial markets and uses those returns to pay for its countries. It is also different in that it doesn't pay for projects as traditional grant-based instruments. But it pays based on results and awards for countries that can prove that they've actually managed to reduce deforestation. So the logic of the fund is quite different from what previously has existed. And to qualify for payments, tropical forest countries also need quite a significant amount of infrastructure to kind of demonstrate that they've reduced deforestation in their territories, which can become a challenge for many developing countries, especially. So we will be discussing all of that and more during the panel. The other important part of the TFFF is its investments in financial market. They imply risks to generate yields, and so that is also quite different to other instruments that exist in the current climate finance space. So that is something that we will also be discussing with some of our other panelists. First, then I'll introduce Tørris and Paki, who join us today, who are the first to arrive. Thanks for joining. And yes, I'll first introduce you two and perhaps ask you some initial questions. So Tørris is the executive director of the Rainforest Foundation Norway since 2021. Prior to joining the RFN, he worked for over 20 years in the humanitarian sector with armed conflict and disasters, mostly with the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. And Paki is a public policy advisor at Plan for the Planet, an organization which developed the TFFF Watch platform, where she codifies policy positions and advancing them through the writing of policy papers, lobbying work, and public campaigns. So thanks for joining both perhaps to start, I would want to ask the question on how does the TFFF kind of fit in the landscape of international climate finance, and kind of what its role is in closing this existing gap in forest finance. The UNEP has identified this 200 billion annual gap on to channel funds for the forests. So how does the TFFF kind of help in that in closing that gap? Perhaps we can start with Tørris, and Paki, you can chip in as well if you want.
Right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. This is an interesting and an exciting conversation to have, and as we're moving slowly towards the COP30 in Brazil and in Belém. I think sort of what's new and why this is particularly important is because it has its focus on primary forests. So it's not sort of previous instruments have largely focused on reducing deforestation. But if we look at sort of where are sort of our planetary life support systems generated or maintained, that's in the intact remaining standing rainforests that we have. And here TFFF comes in and provides a funding mechanism that is complementary to what exists. It doesn't replace anything else, and it shouldn't replace anything else. And addresses primary forests. So it's really addressing one of the significant gaps in the current financing architecture. So that's one element. The second element is in a sort of is in the it recognizes intact forests, and then how does it go about it? And one is sort of how do you mobilize the financing, but I think also how finance then is channeled, in the sense that it has it sort of conceptually it recognizes the importance and significance of indigenous people and local communities as key forest stewards, and it sets sort of the standard also for direct support, and includes that in the entire setup. And very often it's we're referring to those 20% sort of allocated towards indigenous people and local communities. And I just want to gently remind everybody on that. That's a minimum. It's not a ceiling. That's the minimum, and sort of it's open for more. And I think maybe João, our colleague from Brazil, can say something about that notably Brazil does not tend to look at it as a minimum. So I think here both Brazil have sort of created an exciting conversation and tool and a financing mechanism that addresses this. And I think also that the Global Alliance on Territorial Communities with Juan Carlos, they also have been heard in this process. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but they've been recognized as one of the important stakeholders, which also has contributed to creating a robust mechanism that includes and recognizes the role of indigenous people and local communities. I leave it that here for now. I hope we'll have more questions and to answer as we go along.
Thank you, Tørris, and welcome to João, who just joined us from Brazil. He's the lead expert on the TFFF at the Brazilian Ministry of Finance. So yeah, thanks for joining us, João. I'll direct the next question to Paki, and perhaps you can I'll direct the next question to you, Paki. Can you tell us about the blended finance element of the fund, and kind of its importance in leveraging also private investments into the kind of forest finance landscape, which has historically been kind of a weak point in its scope.
So just a disclaimer, so I come from more of the technical aspects of conservation and forest laws and all of that. But our understanding of the blended finance model is that TFFF is different in the sense that it takes away from the grant and aid model and it brings in investors who can actually invest in for climate finance. And the blended is wherein like the sovereign fund, so like the public funding will create something known as the junior tranche, which is the initial funding of about $25 billion that could encourage the private investors to also invest in this fund to make a big corpus, which will then be invested in markets, and the returns of which will then be funding conservation. And it is very unique because, again, it goes beyond donations and it is profitable for both the tropical forest countries who are receiving these funds without having to really invest funding, and also to the investors who are going to be paying for conservation. So that's kind of the governments and private investors come together for like a greater cause. But I'm sure others would be on the panel would be more likely to comment on that.
João, would you want to add anything on that point as well?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for having me. Sorry for coming in late. I was on time, but I had problems with Zoom, believe it or not. Not from coming from the other event that I was in. Paki said it very well. The major innovation here is the fact that we're not going out there and asking countries for grants anymore. We're asking them to make an investment. Because we tried to ask for grants for 20 years. And the best thing we got was about $1 billion that we got for the Amazon Fund over a period of those 20 years. If you think about it, that's $50 million a year. You know, some countries made large promises. The U.S. government came in and promised $500 million in 2023. In 2024, still with the same president, the good one, he brought that down to $50 million, so 10% of what had been promised. And now, of course, we have never seen even those $50 million. So, you know, it cannot depend on the willingness, political will, and budget possibilities of developed countries to fund this. It needs to come from something that is more perpetual and constant and independent, and that's what set us into this mission. And yes, the idea is, think of an endowment fund that funds major universities in the US and funds lots of other foundations that do NGOs and that do work. You have an amount of capital, you make an investment, that investment will generate a return, you pay out all the obligations you have to the debt you have incurred, something is left in the end of the day, you use that to pay for the forests. There is some risk, there are years where you might need very exceptional years, kind of like we've had with the pandemic or with the great financial crisis, 2008, 2009, you may need to suspend that, but it shouldn't. It should be a lot more regular than what you see today with grants and aids.
Thanks, Joe. And having having sort of described that that condition of the fund as being kind of more perpetual and you know, with the participation of private investors. Tørris, I wanted to go back to you from a donor perspective in say a donor country. If you were in kind of in that position, what would make the TFFF kind of attractive in a way in being different from kind of the other financial mechanisms? What makes it kind of appealing in kind of having impact from your investment?
Well, you know, this is very much sort of the perspective we've tried to take in thinking around how can we convince the Norwegian government to provide support to the TFFF. So in sort of we have, how should I say, invested in trying really understanding the model and understanding also the risk and how the risk is managed, and then being able to communicate this accordingly to the Norwegian government. Of course, I mean, with any investments, yes, there is a risk, but let's not forget that there's also a risk on the other end, and that is that we're not stopping deforestation, and these intact forests get lost, and they are global service providers, public service providers in terms of ecosystem services that really have a global function. So it's not that there's risk only on one end and there's no risk on the other end. And I think that is one of the elements that addresses. But I think it's, as Joao said, I mean, it's an investment that has its return. So that allows for donor countries where we're seeing that ODA budgets are being more constrained, that allows them to come on board. Nevertheless, they're going to be paid back on their investment, and in a sense, you only need to budget for the loss or for the risk allocation, and not for the entire loan. So I think that makes it attractive, and I think also an element in that is that you can pool funds from different countries and from different sources of funding. So it's not you're not going alone. You're bringing multiple stakeholders together to contribute to something really at scale and financing sort of this global public service delivery at scale. So I think in that sense, it is interesting, and also the investment that has been made in terms of devising a mechanism that is robust and that invites for private capital to also invest. And I've been in the room together with people from the German Ministry of Finance. They're asking very hard questions in terms of how is this configured, and we want them to ask the hard questions, because that will, at the end, if they get the right answers, and I think that's what Brazil is continuously sort of developing and responding to and delivering, then we will also get the support. And we now, I mean, we have the signals from the UK, from Norway, from Germany, who've been sort of the champions of global forest finance, that they will be contributing. We've just heard that Indonesia, assuming on the same scale as Brazil, is going to contribute. And so we have now a number of tropical forest countries themselves also investing into the TFFF. And that's been one of the criticism that well, there's investment is only coming from one side. No, it's not. When the early adapters here, the early ones who are supporting and going out there is Brazil and Indonesia and other tropical forest countries.
Right, and since you mentioned it, then I think it's appropriate to bring it back to Joao, because Tørris did mention that the currently, well, the countries that are actually pledging funds to the TFFF, the only country so far has been Brazil with a 1 billion investment. So could you tell us about what this means for the fund, and also what it signals to other countries? And Tørris also mentioned that the other developed countries are asking very tough questions on how it is configured. So yeah, would you also comment on what type of questions have you received, or what kind of concerns have you received from other potential donors?
Sure, Sebastian. So yeah, we have Brazil has made this $1 billion commitment, and we are getting news from Indonesia. As you know, President Lula is there now, talking about a bunch of things, but also this topic. And we're pretty certain that they're going to support the TFFF. This is actually a major achievement already, because it was hard to bring them to the table. They were on and off a little bit lately. But they're on and now for good, and they're talking of a commitment. We don't know. I personally don't know exactly how much. I've been on call since 8 a.m. this morning in Brazil. But it's, the one thing that I was thinking here of was that it would be very funny if, it seems like that Ethiopia may be more willing to come into this than Germany and Norway and the UK and France, which is ridiculous, right? I mean, hopefully Ethiopia will not be the next one to make an announcement. We totally understand that, and we agree that there are some aspects of this that need further refinement, and they will be done. Just like as any business plan that you go up to a bank and you show, look, I have this business idea, please help me fund it. You don't have all the single details figured out before you go in and the bank makes a decision to fund it. You just get a sense that this can work. You provide proof of concept. And we believe that is what we have done. And that is why Brazil and perhaps now Indonesia may be making a pledge because we have shown that there are not only one way, but multiple ways of making this work, both in terms of where you're going to invest, as well as how you're going to issue debt. But then lately, some specific questions started to show up, which is, well, what if a very negative thing happens in the very beginning, which is, I don't know, next year? What do you do? What if one of the papers you've invested in gets downgraded? We have answers for all of those. I mean, we could have a 1,000-page concept note with every contingency and provision for every single thing that can happen, but it doesn't make sense to do it that way. Those decisions need to be made by the countries that make a commitment and that become stakeholders to this thing, that have skin in the game, so that they will now decide how to carry it forward. I don't want a country that has not made any commitment to come and say, oh, but you got to do it this way, you got to do it that way. These things need to be decided collectively. So yes, so for example, what happens if a paper gets downgraded? Well, this happens every time in the markets, and asset managers are used to this. And what you do is start selling those, and you move away from those papers, and then you move into another asset. There's trillions of dollars out there of assets that you could, and this is, it's not like you buy an asset and you get locked into that. You keep managing it actively, and every day markets fluctuate every day because there's transactions happening every day and people moving from one position to another. So you don't need an active asset manager to make this happen. You know, what if something very, very bad happens in the next year? Keep in mind, we're not going to build this like as this. We have $25 billion, then we leverage it right away, 125, and then invest all of that. There's a ramp up. There's a slow build up process. You do that, you know, you leverage slowly. You reach a certain size, then you issue more. Sorry about this, guy. I had a call here. And of course, you manage your duration according to the level of risk you're willing to take. So there are many ways you can make this happen. Now, of course, I cannot, you know, nail every single decision, because then I leave no room and flexibility for an asset manager to make decisions, and there needs to be some room there to optimize this thing. So bottom line is, of course, there's, I mean, hundreds of things that need to be decided, but these are like the details of the house. We've shown that this is a house that has 3 rooms. It's got, you know, this certain area, and it's got this kind of roof, and it's got this kind of ceiling, and this is how it's gonna, you know, whether you're gonna have a green wall, or you're gonna have a picture on the wall, or you're gonna. Those are details that, of course, not now, that they don't need to be decided by COP. So. We have not had, of course, any firm commitment from any countries, including Indonesia. Let's make that clear. Only Brazil has made that clear commitment. We do hope, so in terms of what we expect to get in timing and everything. So Brazil actually becomes, Brazil COP presidency actually starts with the conference. So we go on for another year as COP presidents. So we have established that time as a time where we need to raise the entire 25 billion, which is the junior capital. Now, we do not need, so we certainly do not need to reach that, and we know we're not going to reach that by COP, and we've always known, given the number of countries that were actually seriously considering this. But what we do need to achieve is a certain level of engagement and commitment that shows that this idea has enough support to go on. That is the political goal, to reach a certain size that means, well, this is serious, guys. This is not just some wild idea from Brazil. So then you can go out and you can talk to everyone else that's out there, that you can very easily get the rest of the cash that we need. We just need to reach a certain size to show that the world community is actually interested in this, and it's not, as I said, some weird thing that the Brazilians thought of just because they wanted to look good on the COP30 picture. So that's where we are right now.
Thanks so much, João Paulo. It's interesting to hear that, yeah, that you see it as a kind of evolving target, and especially the 25 billion goal as not necessarily having to be all of it met at COP, but you know, developing afterwards. I would like to transition also to the issue of forest payments, and I see that Juan Carlos has managed to join the call. Thanks so much for joining us, Juan Carlos. He is the sorry, can you hear me? I think
I can hear you. I mean, I hear you very well, Sebastian.
yes. Thanks. Sorry, sorry about that. My internet got froze a bit. Juan Carlos is joining us from the Ecuadorian Amazon. He's a Shuar leader and Nobel Peace Prize nominee, and is the executive secretary of the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities. So thanks for joining us, Juan Carlos. I did want to ask you about the issue of forest payments and kind of the needs for forest finance in territorial communities, and what sort of could be achieved with this kind of extra additional kind of funds flowing into local communities. The fund also kind of has the provision that you have to demonstrate to have managed deforestation before receiving the payment. So can you also talk us through kind of what conditions are in local communities to meet these criteria, and to kind of give that evidence to the TFFF?
Thank you, Sebastian, and hello, everyone. Sorry about that. We're having some problems with the Zoom connection, but I'm here also to share a little bit for your question, following your question, hearing what the great panelists that were speaking behind me. But the point is this, that Global Alliance, we decide to participate in this process building and this dialogue on behalf of indigenous people from the tropical and subtropicals. The Global Alliance also connected with your questions as we need to secure our livelihoods with, you know, we as indigenous people, we specialize and connecting with where we live, what we have, and then how we need to sustain there, because we have under a lot of threats. But the point is that build and consolidate the deforestation topics that free supply chains with the various other with staying territories. So implement sustainable forest management plans and organize and many activities, but the community itself, so the indigenous people itself, that they have their own plans of life in the territory. So each organization has their own governance, their own plans of life. So we need to, for example, implement restorations or afforestation plans, continue protecting special areas that for us as very symbolic, as a cultural, with identity, a sacred place that is connected with tradition and knowledge. So, so monitor also to these activities that we need to connect also what we have, instruments we need and we have to bring from outside, to like technologies and GSAs, assistance, drones, etc. And but I think so it's very, very important for me in this situation is that how you open these channels with the governments itself. As a global alliance, generally, globally, we are connected, overlapped, related with 24 countries in the tropics, but all the countries not always facilitate this dialogue. So there is some countries that facilitate this dialogue, so we need to use those dialogues and channels to operationalization how the funds is going to go on the ground. So as you know, many people knows, and there's a data that many of the resources from the top is not going directly in the territories or the guardians. So this is something that we need to continue support the organization systems, organization structures, the governance, and also the technical administration training, because we are asking equal condition. We are asking that these capacities and that we need to know how we can present our proposals, or we need to know how we can present our plans of life in the context that we need to operationalize this financial resource. And then we can monitor, we can see how the indigenous people also that we are asking, we are using our own systems, our own dynamics, because there's a lot of intermediaries in the middle. There's a lot of people in the middle who wants to help us, but it's time to realize in the self-determination that we are always are asking how we can use our own system of financial resource, how like Podali in Brazil, like Fondo Mesoamericano in Mesoamerica, or Amazon Viva in Amazon Basin, how you give this supportive and the trust and accompanying this process that all the resources that we are going to use for the indigenous organizations, indigenous culture, indigenous group, going directly on the ground.
Thanks so much, Juan Carlos, for clarifying, those needs. Staying on the topic of kind of implementing the forest maintenance and managing to keep track of of how forests evolve and the impacts of the TFFF itself. I wanted to also ask Tørris and Paki both. You have raised the issue of tracking forest degradation and kind of keeping a close track of how to make those discounts that the TFFF foresees when there is some level of deforestation or where there is some level of forest degradation. What mechanisms kind of are proposed by the TFFF and to keep track of this as the fund kind of evolves, and yeah, what limitations it might have or what challenges it might have in kind of implementing the tracking system. Perhaps we can start with Tørris, and then Paki, you can also comment, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, Rainforest Foundation Norway, we have in this whole sort of development of the TFFF, we've moved from being sort of a reluctant observer to a critical champion, and sort of the critical in the critical champion dimension is very much sort of related to that. We think and that's around the degradation monitoring. I think one of the very positive and innovative dimensions of the TFFF is that it both protects standing rainforests and it penalizes further degradation, right? And we know that degradation often is the precursor to deforestation. So it's sort of it's the slippery slope of going from degradation to deforestation. So addressing that is extremely important. And I think it's of course, I mean, Rainforest Foundation Norway, we want to contribute to protecting rainforests, so an intact rainforest. So that in itself is sort of extremely important for the integrity of the mechanism and the contribution that it makes. But we think it's also important in regards to investors coming in, because we cannot, in a sense, have an investment which says intact forests, and when you open the box 10 years later, you find the result is degraded forests. So I think we really need to invest in developing robust monitoring mechanisms to make the mechanism work, and to also assure investors that these mechanisms are in place to avoid degradation from happening. We think it's possible. We think that what is proposed with a proxy indicator is I mean, that's one proxy indicator, and that's sort of good in itself, but it's not sufficient for the whole mechanism. But we think it's also fully possible with technology that we have today in sort of monitoring systems in the making, that can be solved as we go along. And Joao was explaining also that this isn't becoming operational on 1st of January in 25. So there's an opportunity to do that, but it needs to be a robust mechanism to monitor the degradation.
Right. You mentioned the proxy. A proxy indicator. I understand that is forest fires, right? It as kind of using that as a proxy. Perhaps Paki, can you explain how that works, and yeah, what can it tell you and what can it not tell you?
So exactly what Tørris was talking about, that with the proxy indicator, of forest fire. So under the TFFF concept note, only forest fire, degradation by fire is considered as degradation. But in reality, that is one of the many aspects of degradation, right? So again, like 10 years later, if you open a forest and it is degraded, then it kind of questions, like, like all the investments that were made. Again, like Plan for the Planet, we also send out a recommendation note with various other indicators which could potentially be included. So there is biomass loss, there is canopy cover. Agreed that these are a little more technical to observe than just the forest fire, which is easy to capture from the satellite data. But the concept note 3.0, it kind of mentioned that the degradation monitoring will be revised periodically. So starting 3 years. So again, like it is a stakeholder-oriented process wherein with more technical expertise, we're hoping that it includes more aspects. The other aspect that we also discussed internally also was all of these features like deforestation and degradation specifically, you will not be able to understand the extent of it within 1 year. So when the degradation starts, so like because the penalties would be applied every year and so will the payouts be made every year. So it is not really possible to understand the extent of degradation that happened within a year to be able to make that penalty. So that's one of the aspects. And again, the forest fires, like I mentioned, is one of the many ways of degradation. But then there have to be like more proxies to be included for degradation monitoring.
Right. Thanks. Thanks, Paki. I wanted to move back to Joao and ask on a separate topic about the issue of the exclusion policy and that sort of being an early concern from stakeholders sort of involved in the fund. Yeah, I wanted you to walk us through what this kind of policy implies for the investments in the TFFF, and what does it imply for investments in, since it is very, it is very focused on emerging market bonds. How does that exclusion policy of polluting industries, kind of not investing in polluting industries, how does that play out in practice when developing the investment strategy for the TFFF?
Well, Sebastian, very straightforwardly, that means that it puts more risk into the structure. The restriction of not being able to invest into companies that work with oil, natural gas, coal. Of course, it is very important from the environmental point of view, but it has implications to which assets you can buy in the market and the spreads that you can generate with the fund. However, in a strong effort to attend to those concerns that were coming from both sponsoring countries and NGOs, we have decided to rule out the possibility of any of those assets that I've mentioned being part of the investment portfolio for the TFFF. That means that we're going to have to go into a little bit more risky assets of other nature, of other types of economic activity. But we still, that still can very well be done. We think that there are enough assets out there in the market. Of course, these things change all the time, but the portfolios that we have used for simulations no longer contain any of those papers, and we have stated that in the concept notes.
Thanks, Joao. I don't know if any of the other panelists want to comment on that issue. Otherwise, we can move back to Juan Carlos. Well, Juan Carlos, you mentioned the kind of some of the barriers for kind of effectively applying for these funds from the perspective of communities in developing countries. What type of support do you think could kind of facilitate that access to the funds? And well, you mentioned training, for example, in skills as one of the elements, but what could other kind of partners do to kind of improve on the conditions necessary to kind of apply for those funds?
Thank you, Sebastian. This is very important, and I just want to always, it's very interesting what our friends are presenting here. Is like Also, when you are on the ground, the grassroots, when you are working and living in the territories with indigenous organizations, always you have to put in mind 100% the externalities, how you understand these externalities, what concessions are, what the threats are indigenous people, daily by daily, minute by minute. Saying that, and then we have proposals, we did referendums to put the oil, to leave the oil under the surface and to put the mining oil, but all of this sometimes it's a very construct and aggressive visions or decisions what we wanted as indigenous people, because we want to present solutions and connect what you are saying. Always is important in this capacitation or knowledge, as I think, so that it's very important to understand that that equal conditions, the modality, how we are going to, why we are inviting to the table with the governments and multilaterals, because we have to have the equal level of information, even that information that I know, maybe you don't know on the other side, even the government, I don't know how to process. So this intercultural dialogue is very challenging for some countries, because sometimes all the time it's coming from the top to the ground. But this is not acceptable anymore. I mean, we were receiving this for many, many years, and it's not been working. But for us as indigenous people, is also to change the narrative, this lack, how it is going to narrative. If you look at me only as a simple beneficiary on the grassroots, is not good. If you look at me as a real actor, as a partner, as somebody that we can do this together, because I'm going to be in the grassroots, giving my life, protecting your theory, skills, or decisions, how to protect these beautiful, pristine areas still that we are holding, biodiversity. So this is giving our life, it is giving all the metrics that how we can follow out this metaphor conceptually as a human being, as a person, how I am monitoring and protecting this, and what necessities really I need on the ground, because I need to live there, I need to survive there, so I need to confront many necessities. So this lack of the conversation, that's what we present and we develop at the global alliance and the global line, like Shandia mechanism. But what is this Shandia mechanism? What we are doing, what is working, because we don't need to invent again. It's something that we are working very hard, and we need support in this, of course, and then support, not only just finance and money. Money is important, but also you have to accompany and to try to design the theory, to combine this, the language from my vision, my reality, to the reality with the other levels, and being international. Sometimes we feel that this is very lack, but finally I think so that follow up a political orientation from the indigenous leaders, what our voices or demands are connected, how is received. You need to help us to change the narrative. And that's why we really think that this great initiative that Brazil is presenting, the TFFF, and we accept to go in the building, but is going to work successfully in the future, we don't know, but we are building. I really believe that we need to do a step to see everything that is good to protect to Mother Earth, good to protect my rights as indigenous people. I'm going to support any idea it is, but I don't know how it's going to be the methodology or the application or the operability. That is the lack. We want that the resources go in this direction, but sometimes it doesn't work. But we have to reconnect again. What is the lack? What rights I have in the constitutions in writing? I don't need to invent. We need to connect. What rights is flexible? What is working? What financial institutions, methodology, indigenous people they have? What is working? Podali, Nusantara, Angasha, etc. What I was mentioning. So there is existing territorial funds. There are. So saying this, I finally maybe the relation with TFFF and JTC, we have a lot of enthusiastic. I'm hearing the many governments, but also they have a lot of questions, because people from outside of the tropical subtropics, they have questions. I cannot leave behind all the indigenous people, because we are collective. We are collective. They say, I cannot forget indigenous people in the Arctics or in the oceans. No, we all together in this planet. So the initiative, what we are doing, creating here in the good faith. So we have to legitimize and implement in the agency institutionality of indigenous people with all rights on the grassroots.
Right. Thanks so much, Juan Carlos. That was brilliant. Let me now ask the panel for some audience questions. We've received quite a number of questions on LinkedIn, and if you're watching, please keep sending us our questions. We'll bring those to the panel. So I perhaps can put out this question generally, and those who want to comment on them can open their mics and do so. The first we received was, how can developing countries in Asia, for example, Philippines, with high rates of deforestation, be able to access the fund against requirements like an annual average deforestation rate below 0.5%? So how countries with high deforestation rates can access the TFFF?
Okay. I can comment, and maybe others can come after. And I'm sort of commenting also in response to this criticism that has come that tropical forest countries are not investing. I think what we need to understand, in the sense that, I mean, tropical forest countries they have an asset, and the asset are the tropical forests, and they can make choices in sort of how they protect or not protect the rainforests, and if they want to devise sort of this territory by different means. And I think one of the sort of the positive elements of the TFFF is also that you need to become eligible, and you become eligible by reducing your deforestation rate. So you're making a commitment towards becoming eligible to maximize the payouts from the TFFF once it's up and running. So there is this incentive, but of course, and I think this is what we've seen in Brazil, this is what we've seen in Indonesia. It does require domestically created political will to actually end deforestation. Countries have committed to ending deforestation by 2030. And that means also that we need the TFFF as a financing mechanism to kick in also, or to continue post 2030, when deforestation, for all we hope, has eventually ended. So it requires this political will on the domestic side to actually end deforestation and showcase that through decreasing deforestation rates.
Thanks, Tørris. I guess the next question I would direct it to João directly, because there is some also curiosity on who is expected to invest from the private side. So who would be the natural investors in the TFFF from the private side, whether it is pension funds or other forms of institutional investors?
Sure, Sebastian. And before I go into that, I'll just add a little comment here on what Tørris just said. We were, this thing about the deforestation rate. It wasn't there in the very beginning. We didn't think of it this way. But during the discussions with the countries that are part of the steering committee, we were told that, look, it doesn't make sense, even though I do think it makes sense, but many countries said it doesn't make sense to keep paying forest countries if they will continue to deforest. So let's say I'm paying you this huge amount of money, but your deforestation rate is going up, or you're losing 1% of your forest every year. So we need to establish a limit. That's how that came up. And the limit was chosen, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not the environmental guy, but because 0.5% was the average of world deforestation, probably in 2023. And we were discussing this in 2024. So, of course, when you have an average, some countries are above and some countries are below that international average. So what we're trying to do is to help countries that are above And for example, there's a big discussion about a new Congo Basin pledge within the World Bank, just as they did 5 years ago, for grants to go into the Congo. We could use those resources to perhaps help these countries converge to that threshold, so they can then join TFFF and no longer need a grant from developed countries anymore. So that's just give you an overview of what we're doing. On the private side, so these the debt or the bonds that will be issued by TFIF in this case, that is, when we go out to the market and ask them to please lend me money, you don't do that talking directly to one particular institution. You go out in the market, kind of like a stock exchange sort of thing, and you buy and sell. Okay, so the countries, what we're going to do is we're going to issue these debt notes or these debt bonds, which means it's a contract, IOU, and we're going to go in the market and sell those. So many people can buy. We could buy ourselves, myself, Tørris Jæger, we could buy those papers if your bank allows you to do that. So any investors can buy it. But we do think that the ones that would be most interested here are, would be coming in a bulk, would be pension funds and insurance companies, and also sovereign wealth funds, because these guys have a very long-term sort of parameter to their investments. They're very conservative, so you need to have a very well-rated paper, like a AAA or a AA, but they're willing to offer cash for very low cost and long-term. And that's probably where the bulk of this is going to come from.
Thanks, Joao. Another question we're getting, and perhaps Paqui and Juan Carlos would also want to comment on this one, is on the role of illegal activities, and especially with the focus in the Amazon rainforest, with the international price of gold at its peak and illegal gold extraction now becoming a driver for deforestation more than before. This illegal gold extraction is destroying ecosystems and especially attracting organized crime. So what potential does the TFFF have to contribute to tackling this crisis?
Sebastian, I think so. This is a very important question and also very relevant for many indigenous organizations. And because we did some referendums, we did some consultations, even that the government are presenting the table, and we did that. But sometimes this is not respecting and not follow up on making it applicable. I mean, making the action or transition. Even we need to talk. We need to create a dialogue. We need to develop this transition process, because we cannot do this from now and tomorrow. We have to do these processes. I mean, how to stop that and how to throw this transition. It's not because we want it. All indigenous people want it. We did a referendum in the entire national country. I said, come on, this is something not for indigenous people. It is that civil society, all the indigenous groups, other societies. So saying this, we need to reflect. Was $100 million on behalf of the forest. $100 million maybe avoid for the social concerns, indigenous people concerns petition. But in a matter of the good faith, I have some faith that we need to create dialogue before to get in this conflict that is happening. But government has to create these channels that we can work together as a citizens, as my autodetermination. What do I have? How I contribute visible? NDCs. Yes, I have my NDCs. You know, what else you want? I mean, I have my territory, my NDCs, I have contributions, reductions. I mean, what else? I mean, this is something that we need to change the narrative. In the moment that we need this cliche, I think so. We salute this principle that put in aside with this new initiative the Brazil government is leading the TFFF. We salute that. I mean, the 80% target for indigenous people and 20%. But my question, in the end of the day, sometimes, and the leaders say, the billions of dollars coming. Are you saying, for example, one government giving $20 billion, or Norway is giving billion? So they say, this is for the 20% or only 100%. still we have to build. We need to talk. We need to get these answers. That doesn't mean that I'm going to get blocked. I'm going to be against. No, we continue building. This is a process of building, but it's not easy because there's so many questions and we need to disseminate this information. Finally, I think so. The past always giving the example to reflect. I mean, Norway, I am hearing what Torian was mentioning about the rainforest, about deforestation, but Norwegian was giving a lot of money. A lot of money. I mean, as a country, I respect that, but sometimes we need to see why still the money is not going on the ground. Why? So there is something, what is happening? Something is happening in the middle. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else
I
would
just
want to comment? Yeah.
want to add on exactly on those points. So I think one of the things about the TFFF, which makes the fund very special, that this is largely a non-earmarked money, as opposed to a lot of the grants that would come in, the grants and aids, which are traditional funding for conservation. The TFFF provides funding to the governments as well as to the communities without a prescription as to what do they do with that money. There's a general sense of things that it has to be used for conservation, but it does not specify how. There is no project plans that is specified by the TFFF. So for organized crimes, so there is like a very, and also TFFF is permanent stream of funding. So it's like a permanent fund. It does not have a deadline to it really. So these funds can actually be used by the government to tackle these very specific issues for which otherwise they generally are not able to raise funds for. And like President Lula has been talking about, the purpose of the TFFF is to make forest worth more alive, like trees worth more alive. So it just basically incentivizes that it is more profitable to keep the forest intact as opposed to cut them for whatever other reasons. So it is something that can support conservation beyond just protecting forests, but also using it for tackling all of these illegal crime systems.
Thanks, Paki. We have time for one last question. We've received tons of questions from this very interesting panel on LinkedIn. I will have to direct this one to Joao again. The German Development Bank, KfW, calculates that a minimum amount of $14 billion start capital is needed for the TFFF. Do you think this is achievable by COP? And in general, I think we could also take the opportunity to have some closing remarks and what your expectations for COP30 will be in Belém.
Right. So you got to keep in mind here that there is two aspects to this. There's a financial one and there is a policy/political one. So from the financial side, there is no minimum limit of what there needs to be the investment in the junior capital to make this work. If I have only the Brazilian $1 billion that we have now, I can go out and do exact the same thing because it's perfectly scalable. It's not something that I need financially. I need to reach a certain size to make it happen. The reason why I need to reach a certain size is because let's say I only get like 10% of what we are expecting. In that case, I'd only be able to pay 10% to forest countries. And 10% of $4 is 40 cents. And that may not be a strong enough incentive for them to join and to reduce deforestation and keep their forest standing. So that is the policy question. And then finally, sorry, there's a third one, which is there's a political threshold, which is, we do not need to reach 25, nor even, being very honest, $14 billion by COP in junior investment. What we need to reach by COP is a certain level of commitment that shows that there is enough interest in the international community to make this happen. Because we can carry on in the following months. I mean, there are actually 5 countries to which we've been talking for a longer period. Those are Germany, Norway, the UK, France, and the Emirates. And there are countries who have just started to talk to. Australia, Japan, Canada, China. China's been kind of in the middle. So we don't expect to get pledges from these countries that we just started talking to. We can perfectly get those after COP. And as I said, Brazilian presidency runs through the next year. So what we do need to get to COP is a political message that this is a way forward. Let's continue making this happen. And so we believe so much in this that we're willing to put our money on this. This is what it's not from a number of significant players. That's all. But I'm not going to put a number here because that affects negotiation. So. And sorry, Sebastian. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's noon our time here in Brazil. I really need to go to yet another call, which will be my 5th in the day. But it was a pleasure to be here with you guys and help clarify some of these messages. Have a good one.
Thanks so much, Joe, and thanks to all the panelists as well for joining us today. This is unfortunately all the time that we have, but this will be an evolving topic, and we'll be certainly at Climate Home doing a lot more coverage of the TFFF. So thanks again for joining. I don't know if any of you want to give any final remarks as well. Tørris or Paki?
No, I think what we really need is positive momentum going into Belém, and now with Indonesia sort of announcing their contribution, and we hope others to follow. And I think that's what's necessary to make this turn into what we want it to be. Thank you for having the discussion and for having us.
I just wanted to also add that I think it is very important that we remember, like, the TFFF is an evolving concept. Like, it has evolved from the concept no 1 to 2 and then 3. And it is very interesting because working from the civil society, there have often been a lot of barriers to engage with these processes. But then TFFF does seem to be truly stakeholder oriented. And there is an open channel of communication. So a lot of the suggestions that are put forward do get accepted or responded to. So I think it is a very positive notion that this will evolve into something which can be like tailor-made into what is best for like the greater good.
Juan Carlos,
thank you. Also, Sebastian, also very brief, and thank you very much for the invitation. And also just want to mention, as indigenous people, Global Alliance, the members of the Tropicals globally, I think so. We are partners, and just work with us, talk to us. Always we are asking, don't forget about to injustice enabled conditions important, partners and no beneficiary, respect and transparency processes and trust especially, and the application and implementation, the actions. We are together in this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone in the audience as well for tuning in. We'll be doing a lot more coverage, and as mentioned, we'll be in Belém as well. So make sure to subscribe and follow Climate